Welcome to Psych Talk. I'm your host, Dr. Jessica Rabin, a licensed clinical psychologist. If you are a mental health professional, student in the social science field, or just interested in psychology and mental health, this podcast is for you. Although topics discussed on this podcast are similar to therapy, Psych Talk is not a replacement for therapy and is for educational and entertainment purposes only. So let's dive into today's episode. Hey everyone, welcome back to Psych Talk and welcome back to season 6. I am so grateful that you are all here with me today, and I'm even more excited because we have a very special guest today for the first episode of season 6 to kick off our new year correctly. So I am so excited to have SC Perot on the podcast. She is a professor in human and organizational development, an author, and a speaker. So SC, thank you so much for being here today and for helping me bring in the new year with this wonderful episode we're going to have today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here. And one thing you don't know about me is I'm actually obsessed with New Year's. This is the perfect episode for me to be on. I am so happy. This is great.
I did not know that. So I'm so glad that I asked you to switch up this episode and do a New Year's episode. So, other than being obsessed with New Year's and everything else I said, can you introduce yourself, a little bit about your background, what you do, and any other fun facts you want to share?
Absolutely. So I am a former corporate lawyer who is living her best life, no longer practicing big law. And I pivoted a few years ago during the pandemic. I loved my job. I was so grateful. I worked with awesome people, but the pandemic really threw a wrench at my
Mhm.
career. And I ended up moving to Nashville to teach at my alma mater. I'm an adjunct faculty member at Vanderbilt University. I absolutely love Vanderbilt. It's so fun to be with these vibrant, passionate, super smart students. And I teach this in this fantastic program, Human and Organizational Development. It's kind of Vanderbilt's answer to a business undergrad major. They did away with their business program a couple years ago, and this is actually, or I guess many years ago at this point. And this is the most popular major at Vanderbilt, and it was the major that I had when I was there. So it's so fun teaching alongside faculty members who were my professors, and it's been so wonderful to be back. And my first book, Styles of Joy, came out in February of 2025. So it's kind of surreal coming up on the 1 year of the launch.
Mhm.
It's been a really wild ride, and I have had so much fun going all over the country in 2025 talking about my favorite subject, which is joy. And I know we're going to get more into that, but after a challenging life chapter several years ago, as I mentioned, stopped practicing big law. And it was also that harrowing pandemic that affected
Mhm.
all of us differently that unfortunately we all remember. And I, on top of that, was navigating heartbreak associated with a devastating divorce. And suddenly, I looked around and no longer recognized my life. And long story short, I turned to happy music in a way I never had before. And I became a super fan of Harry Styles, which is like the world's most random life pivot. Like, trust me,
Mhm.
I feel like crazy when I tell this story. I tell it all the time. I speak all over the country and I still think it's funny. I'm not over how ridiculous this all is. Former corporate lawyer trades
Mhm.
the Blazers in for feather boas, and I saw his show 17 times in 5 countries. And I
Oh my
traveled with
gosh.
strangers I met along the way. It was like my Harry Styles Eat, Pray, Love post-divorce adventure. And along the way, I started critically thinking about joy for the first time.
Mhm.
What is joy? Who has it? Who doesn't have it? Is it big? Is it small? Is it permanent? Is it fleeting? And I joke in the book, I became like Barbara Walters. Like I was like desperately curious and wanting to understand kind of more about this subculture that was so
Mhm.
joyful and fun. And I was so uniquely inspired post-pandemic by how cool it was to be safely singing and dancing with thousands of people in 5 different countries, experiencing this universal kind of common running thread of the beauty of live music and communal and collective joy. So, listen, I am a big believer in trust the process because
Mhm.
you would have told me this story a couple years ago, I would have looked at you like you had two heads. I truly would. Me? no, not me. That's
Yeah.
you're thinking of someone else. Like, surely you're not actually talking to me. I'm a conventional, traditional girl. Like,
Yeah.
this is not in the cards, but here we are.
I love that. And thank you so much for sharing your story because we are going to be talking about joy today. And one thing I was wondering, because I did, do a little research on you. I knew you were a lawyer. And my father-in-law's a lawyer, so I feel like I could say this. Like, I don't usually associate law with like joy, not in like the traditional, if you think of like what lawyers have to go through and their day-to-day work, I usually don't think of joy. And I know that you are so passionate about joy. So thank you for sharing a little bit about your story and how you became so passionate about joy.
It's a very circuitous, bizarre path, but here we are.
So before we like really dive into our discussion, one thing I love to do on the podcast is define terms so we're all on the same page of what we know we're are talking about. So how would you define joy?
Okay, incredible question, but have you read the book?
So I have not read the book
Okay,
yet.
because this is hilarious. Define terms. Okay, wait, this is so good. I love that you just asked this.
So yeah, no, MG said she would send it over to me, but I have not read it yet.
Okay, so I love this because in the introduction of the book, I talk about this class I took in law school, and it was called Business Transactions. And that
Hmm.
was my introduction to the world of legal contracts. And I had this
Okay.
fabulous professor, and she said, what are the three most important ingredients in French cooking? Butter, butter, butter. What are the three most important things in real estate? Location, location, location. And what are the three most important things in a legal contract? Define terms, define terms, define terms. And so I said, as a former lawyer, I feel this immense responsibility that we need to all be on the same page about what we're talking about here. When we're talking about joy, I'm all about defined terms. Jessica, you're hitting home runs over
That
here.
is so funny.
Yeah,
No,
no,
I
this
promise. Like, I mean, in full transparency, I would have loved to read the book before we got this interview
problem.
scheduled, but I kind of love that I haven't read it yet
Yeah,
because now everybody knows that I did not plan that
yes. And
based off your book.
you know what? We already have a serendipitous moment. We're off to the races. This is great. And so I really wanted to nail down that definition of joy in the introduction. And I write it in the book so that we could all be on the same page from the jump. And as I was teaching at Vanderbilt,
Hmm.
and I make it clear that whenever I say I was researching, I don't mean that in a technical academic sense. I
Yeah,
just mean lowercase r research. And as I'm talking to people about joy, I used my students as guinea pigs, and I asked
of
them,
course.
I said, don't look up in a dictionary, no Google, no nothing. What do you think the definition of joy is? And I had them put them on the whiteboard. And I list a lot of those definitions in the book because as I looked at all these varying definitions, I thought, well, they're all correct.
Hmm.
Because if that's the definition of joy for that individual student, that's their definition of joy.
Hmm.
And I actually think that's what makes this subject so fun and interesting is the emotion of joy kind of rises to meet you where you are.
Hmm.
And for some people, joy is jumping up and down at a concert with thousands of people, but also we can find joy in a quiet cup of coffee in the morning.
Hmm.
And not only does the emotion itself kind of shift and change, so does what brings us joy.
Yeah.
And but I was curious because I wanted to understand the technical academic definition of joy. So I actually hired a Vanderbilt student to do academic research on my behalf for the book because I
Nice.
really didn't want to fall down that rabbit hole.
Hmm.
I know my personality, and I knew that that book would become something entirely different if I was no longer writing about just my lived experience, but I was really trying to tackle sort of a technical and academic perspective. And the short answer is happiness and joy are used interchangeably
Yeah.
in academic research, but that's just not consistent with my lived experience. I'm like happiness, like, do I know her? I don't really know. Like that seem
Yeah.
happiness for me feels really abstract. It feels
Okay.
like this receding horizon, like something you're always striving for, but are you ever really going to get there? And I just don't really know that word and that concept. It just doesn't
Hmm.
resonate with me like joy. I'm like, no, no, I know her. Joy?
Hmm.
Yes, yes, yes. I know that feeling. And I end up in the introduction of the book saying, you know, maybe I don't need to precisely define it because I know it when I feel it. And I also know
I
it when
love
I
that.
see it. And I write a lot about this concept of seeing joy in the wild and how it's such a delightfully infectious way to live, is always being on the hunt for joy. And so again, it is interesting, but it's a great
Mm.
question. What's the defined term? And I end up saying, I don't really know.
I love it though. Well, because exactly how you just gave a few examples, for some people, joy is, attending a live show with thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of strangers. For other people, that might literally be their nightmare. And, you gave the example of a cup of coffee in the morning, and some people will be like, well, actually, joy for me is tea,
Hey,
not coffee. Um, but I love that. And I love how you really highlighted it. It's like that feeling that even if you can't put it into words, you know it when you feel it.
absolutely. And I got really interested in the relationship, not just between joy and happiness, which we kind of touched on already, but I got really interested in the relationship between joy and gratitude
Mm,
because I was thinking, I have a unpopular opinion when it comes
okay.
to gratitude. I actually think gratitude can be really complicated. I think the pressure to feel grateful can it can actually be a little toxic at times
I
of
can see that.
well, no, at least
Hmm.
this. And I write in the book, it's like if you have a sprained ankle and someone says you should just be grateful you have a foot, you're like, I mean, like, yeah, but like
But it hurts.
I still need to like deal with this sprained ankle. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I find, I actually think gratitude, this question of, what are you grateful for? That overwhelms me.
Mm,
Where do you stop? Where
yeah.
do you stop? I'm like, well, I'm also grateful I've never been like attacked by a shark. Do you know what I'm saying?
Same. Yeah.
And I'm grateful that my Wi-Fi is working today so I can be on this podcast. And I'm grateful that, I get to see my partner tonight. And and I'm grateful that, the weather's good today. I mean, where do you stop?
Hmm.
For me, one of the reasons I love the subject of joy is I actually think it is a healthy version of a gratitude exercise because
Hmm.
everything that brings me joy, I am grateful for, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. But not
No,
everything
yeah,
or
absolutely.
brings me joy. Where I feel like it's like a guiltless gratitude is one of
Mm,
my working definitions for joy.
yeah.
Is it's this beautiful intersection. And I think you do a lot of, when you reflect on joy, you do a lot of the same work as a gratitude reflection, but it's a lighter lift, I think.
Yeah. No, that makes absolute sense in my mind because I'm going back to your like sprained ankle. It's like, well, at least you have a foot. Like you could be thankful you have a foot that helps you walk,
Right,
but your foot itself probably doesn't bring you joy
right,
on a
right,
daily basis.
right,
Yeah,
right.
that makes a lot of
I
sense.
I I've never told this story publicly, but when my mom first read the manuscript, I said, "Hey, I just have to give you a heads up. I tell a story about growing up and I can take it out if you want, if you don't like how you're represented. And I'll tell you the story in a minute, but she thought it was so dang funny. She goes, do not change it. That is so funny. You have to keep it in. And when we were growing up, there was such an emphasis on gratitude. And I write in the book where like we'd be walking on a family trip or something, and my little sister and I are like, our feet hurt and we're tired of walking. And my mom would say, at least you can walk, you know? And that will shut an 8-year-old right up. I mean,
Yeah.
like, whoa, yeah, you're right. And it's turned into this inside joke with my sister that to this day, and I don't think my mom knew how funny we always thought it was when she'd go that extreme,
Yeah.
don't want to go to school, at least you can go to school. And so my sister's like, I have a headache. And I'm like, at least you have a head. Like it's like our that's my running inside joke with my
I
sister.
love it.
My mom was laughing so hard. She goes, "No, I really was like that when you all were growing up." And I'm like, "Trust me, the messages got through. We heard you
Yes.
loud and clear. Yeah, for sure.
I love that so much. That's so funny.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you and your sister bonded over the shared experience
Yeah.
of your
Yeah.
mom going to the extremes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I love
Exactly.
it. I love it. So, as we said at the beginning of this episode, so at the time this episode releases, we have just entered the new year. And thank you for sharing that you love the new year so much. So, I'm even more excited for this conversation. So, to really kick off our discussion, thinking about the new year and joy, what are some simple daily practices that individuals can implement to find joy in their lives this new year?
So I'm a big fan of morning joy.
Okay.
As I was writing this book, I was thinking back to, I don't know if you ever saw that viral commencement speech at University of Texas at Austin by Admiral William McRaven, and it was all about making your bed. And
Oh,
in
okay. Yes. When you
writing
said the name, I was like, I don't know, but yes. Okay.
writing the book, I think it's just called Make Your Bed.
Making your bed.
Yes, and it's all about how early morning decision making can tee you up for other healthy decisions and productivity later in the day, starting by making your bed. But then I was also thinking about, nutritionists say if you start your morning with an unhealthy breakfast, you're more likely to continue to make unhealthy eating choices throughout the day. So I thought to myself, well, why does that not apply to joy as well? I think it does. What
Hmm.
if you made tiny early morning decisions to bring whimsy, fun, and joy into your day? And maybe that's brushing your teeth to like a ridiculously upbeat song. Why not? Like
Harry
try
Styles.
it. Harry Styles. I'd like to recommend a song called Music for a Sushi Restaurant. It changed my life. Here we are. So, but what if you chose to do something with ridiculous exuberance?
Hmm.
Was. And for me, it's not only blaring happy music, which I love to do all the time. I get those Sonos speakers blaring, but I love feeding my dog breakfast in the morning
Okay.
is one of my most favorite things. And I sing this dumb breakfast song to my dog, and he's excited, and I'm excited, and he treats it like Christmas morning. He's eating the same food he eats twice a
Hmm.
day, every single day. This is nothing exciting. And I just thought, why not? And does that guarantee a joy-filled day? Not necessarily, but
Hmm.
it's a great reminder to me of my agency and choice in the matter. And and accepting, invitations for positivity right from the jump when I wake up. And one of my other favorite stories in the book, a friend of mine was staying with her parents and with her dog, and her dad was feeding her dog one morning. And she overheard her dad saying, "What are you going to have today, Gracie? Is scrambled eggs? How do you take your steak?" And he's pouring kibble. But pretending like it is this lavish breakfast buffet. And he's like, six pancakes? Really? And he's just creating this like silly, and he had no idea she could hear him around the corner. She was like
Hmm.
dying laughing. And turns out he did that like every day. He's like, "What are
Oh,
you having today, Gracie girl? Huevos rancheros? Let's get after it." Just like, but I love that. And I'm like, early morning joy. It's a
yeah.
great reminder.
I love that because, especially with all the examples you gave, they're things that you're already doing in your
Right,
morning routine. Like, if anybody has a dog, unless your dog only eats one time a day and not in the morning, like you're feeding your dog in the morning. We're all
right.
brushing our teeth in the morning. So, taking things that you're already doing and making them more exuberant, to use the word that you did.
Exactly. And one of the other reasons I love this subject of joy is we touched on this a little bit, just that what brings you joy is not necessarily what brings me joy.
Hmm.
And not only is that okay, it's actually great. It's actually awesome. Like it's beautiful that we all have different interests and
Hmm.
passions and talents and experiences and all these things. And I love the subject of joy because it ends up being such a celebration of our uniqueness and what
Hmm.
makes us who we are. I think our moral character and our core values, they define who we are as a person. But what
Yeah.
I call your joy profile, this composite portrait of your joys, That's what makes you uniquely you. And
Mm-hmm.
I lead these workshops and I teach my students, and I'm always asking people what brings them joy. And when I make them write it out, I'm like, write the list, free write it. You should know what brings you joy. And
Mm-hmm.
what's beautiful is that no two people have the same lists ever,
Yeah. Yeah.
ever. And it's so awesome. I think, you know, understanding your joy profile and what brings you joy. And truly, I hope listeners actually write it down.
Okay.
Because when I was in this season of life that was really challenging, I remember, I mean, I was in the thick of grief. I was in so much
Yeah.
pain. My heart was so broken. And I was sitting on an airplane, staring out the window, and I thought, I'm just gonna free write things that bring me joy. And I had
Mm-hmm.
my journal, and I was like miniature Australian shepherds and ginkgo trees. I love an iced Americano. I love, and I'm like, no, no, these are my things. It changed my life because
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, I feel like it snapped me out of autopilot.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I'm walking around, and if I see a ginkgo tree, it's like a little light bulb goes off in my head, and I'm like, oh, that's one of my things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love ginkgo trees. That's right. And I write in the first section of the book, which is all about cultivating joy in your own life, that the opposite of joyful is not joyless, it's jaded. I just think we can
Yeah.
be so asleep at the wheel and we can grow to be so kind of immune to the beauty of the mundane and the everyday. And
Mm-hmm.
I tell my students all the time, life has no dress rehearsal.
Yeah.
Like we're doing it. Like today's
Absolutely.
the day. And every day on the whiteboard, I write the full date. We're recording this December 21st, 2025, and I write the full date, including the year. And underneath it, I say the only one we're ever going to have
Mm-hmm.
because it's true. And I
Yeah.
just find we get in these ruts. We're doom scrolling. We're doing the same thing every day, feeling like we're sick of our routines and everything feels monotonous when actually, it's the whole point.
Mm-hmm.
And there is so much
Absolutely.
beauty in every day. So writing this book was, as you'd imagine, very joy giving.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
reflecting on this topic was so wonderful. And it's kind of like this self-reinforcing experience where it's like, oh, like the further in I get with this hunt for joy, with this celebration of joy, the more is coming back my way.
Mm-hmm.
And so living proof over here of the power of reflecting and focusing on joy.
I love that. And so many things that you were just saying kind of tie into the new year. You talked about values, you talked about the monotony of the day to day. And a lot of times in the new year's, people will set goals or intentions or resolutions, whatever people want to call them, which I think, you know, aligns with a lot of the things you were saying. Maybe they're tired of the monotony, so they're going to set goals for the new year. Maybe they're reflecting on their values and setting goals around that. But with that, a lot of people do put pressure on themselves to meet those goals. They may, give up at the first sign of not meeting their goals. They may burn out trying to meet their goals. And so I was wondering if you could discuss ways to cultivate intentional, lasting joy in the new year, even if somebody is kind of feeling stressed or burnt out, or if somebody's like, okay, maybe my goal for the new year is to cultivate more joy in my life. How can they do that without putting all that pressure on themselves of like, oh, I didn't meet my resolution, so I guess I'm just gonna give up.
Right. I actually am not a huge resolution person
Neither
because
am I.
I feel like I'm setting myself up for failure. It's always something way too ambitious or grandiose.
Hmm.
Um, I had such a fantastic year in 2023. I was on these adventures. I finally felt like myself again after
Yeah.
however many years. And I really just thought, you know what, 2023 is probably never going to be topped. So going into 2024, I was like, I just don't even know. I have no expectations for what this year is going to be following this like blockbuster of a banger year.
Yeah.
And so my theme of the year, instead of a resolution, I
Okay.
chose a theme. And the theme was good surprises, where it was
Ooh,
just like, you know what? My palms are opening up. I have no idea what to expect. Surprise me,
I
2024.
love it.
And every single day, at the end of the day, I wrote a good surprise. What was something good that happened today? It could be as small as I saw a beautiful butterfly. I would write it
Hmm.
down.
I love
Or
it.
I got a phone call out of the blue from a friend. But it was so cool because at the end of the year, all of a sudden, it changed my perspective on my life where I
Hmm.
was like, wow, good things happen to me all the time.
I love it.
And I don't think there was a really material difference between
Yeah.
2024 versus others, but it's what I was focusing on. And,
Yeah.
it was interesting because I had some really hard days early 2024. I had this problem with my eye, which is really terrible. I had like this problem where I had a scratch cornea. It was so painful. It was terrible. And I had to be in bed in the dark for several days. And I was like, well, dang, this is my, this is supposed to be my year of good surprises.
Yeah.
You know what? I was like, no, even though I'm having to be in the dark every day, struggling with this thing, which is really awful, um, because there was nothing you could do but just like wait it out in the dark. And I, my logs for those days, which were objectively terrible days,
Yeah.
I was like, actually, a good surprise was how much I loved Glennon Doyle's audiobook on Spotify today.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
even in those hard days, there's something,
Hmm.
there's something. And a reader came up to me at an event a few weeks ago, and she said, I've really been having a hard time. My really dear friend is in hospice. And
Mm.
she said, after reading this book, I was so focused on finding joy. And she said, I made a point every day as I'm driving from my house to visit her in hospice and back to my house, I am looking for birds. She's like, birds bring me joy. And I have decided I am looking for cute birds on my commute. And she goes, I just want to say thank you. I needed that reminder that even in
Hmm.
hard days, I can find something that's bringing me joy.
I
And
love that.
so I just think resolutions can feel daunting.
Hmm.
It can be too ambitious, too grandiose, too much pressure associated where we don't want to
Yeah.
set ourselves up for failure. We feel like a failure if we don't accomplish this goal. But actually, it can be really tiny decisions that
Hmm.
stack up to make really beautiful, positive change. And
Yeah.
focusing on good surprises, having a theme word of the year, it's a much gentler entry, I think,
Hmm.
into a new calendar year than I have to lose 50 pounds or all these big things.
Absolutely.
So, anyways, I would encourage listeners to start small.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And what I heard through all that was intentionality of being intentional of whether it's finding a good surprise, with the example with the person that came up to you, intentionality and finding birds. And I know from personal experience, I think this is backed by research, but I don't want to say that. And but then I have just made it up. But like if you set your mind to something like when you get a new car, suddenly you see so many of your car on the road. Or, you
Hindsight bias or confirmation bias, is
con
that what?
confirmation bias. Yeah. But I'm like, I don't know if there's actually research on like this, but I mean, there's research on confirmation bias, obviously. Or with the birds, like if you're looking out for birds, or I remember in high school, I had a friend pass away, and his mom shortly thereafter saw a butterfly like land on something at her home and took that as a sign that Ryan was okay. And then, like, she associated butterflies with, a sign from Ryan and would start seeing butterflies a lot more. So, I think intentionality of finding joy or finding good surprises or finding whatever that theme is can really change your perspective. Exactly like you said, by the end of the year, you were like, wow, good things always come to me.
Every
Even if
single
I'm lying
day.
in
Yeah.
the bed in the dark
Yes.
with
With
a scratched
terrible
cornea,
eye thing.
air
Yeah.
cornea.
But at the end of the year, I was like, look at this proof that good things
Hmm.
happen to me. It was
Yeah,
really wonderful.
yeah, absolutely. So, another question I have for you is how do boundaries come into play when creating this joyful life? And, you know, with 2026 here, how can individuals set boundaries in the new year really to, help protect or cultivate the joy that they're desiring?
So part 3 of the book is all about protecting your joy and other people's joy. And I don't explicitly write about boundaries, but I think we
Hmm.
all know that that is a really important way to protect your joy. And I wish I had a simple answer. I wish I did,
Mhm.
but I just, it's so critically important. And I find that what's that phrase? I mean, I'm trying to think. I would have heard this in therapy. The loneliest thing you can do is heal.
Mhm.
Because as you're becoming more aware of how different relationships are affecting you and whatever it may be, and with this kind of personal growth, letting go of certain relationships, I mean, it's certainly painful and or not
Absolutely.
even letting go, but setting different boundaries within but again, protecting your peace, it's the most important thing. I mean, it really is. And um, gosh, boundaries. Let me know if you have a guest that has a great answer on that. I'd love the advice.
I love it. I love it. But yeah, I mean, if going off of what you just said of, when you're healing and you start realizing, oh, maybe certain relationships aren't serving me, like my thought process with joy, if you're trying to intentionally seek out things that make you feel really good, or I know you said you don't know happiness, but a happy or joyful or whatever positive emotion you're feeling, if you're surrounding yourself with people, or even it doesn't have to be people. A lot of time we think of boundaries with people, but it could be certain work, or it could be, things that you're giving your time to. I was going to say extracurriculars. I don't, are they still called extracurriculars if we're adults? But whatever.
I love that.
um,
Yeah, hobbies. Yeah.
hobbies, things like that. If you're finding that those things are not bringing you joy, setting boundaries with that, whether it's doing less of it or saying no to, yes, I'm not going to volunteer for the 17th time for this
Right.
thing that I don't actually
Right.
enjoy doing.
I have two thoughts on this kind of as you're putting it in this context. First, I think it's always important to remember the difference between your needs and your wants.
Oh, absolutely.
And for me, sometimes even communicating that, if I'm setting a boundary of, sorry, this isn't a want, it's a need, that feels really empowering to me. And there's a lot of clarity in that sentence. But the other thing that came to mind when you were saying, maybe something's not bringing you joy anymore, maybe it used to. Your joy profile shifts and changes.
Hmm.
And that is such an interesting dynamic with this subject of joy. Is what brings you joy one day might not bring you joy the next, and that's actually okay. You know,
Yeah.
if our joy profile didn't shift and change, I'd still be wearing that Barney the dinosaur t-shirt I was obsessed with when I was 4 years old.
Hmm.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
And I think so often when I ask people what brings you joy, they give me sort of this glazed over look a lot of times.
Hmm.
And they say, I don't even know. I don't even know what I love anymore. And at first I thought that was sort of sad, like maybe a little depressing. And then I
Yeah.
actually thought, no, it's just a reminder that this is an ongoing kind of reflection. And
Hmm.
it does, like I said, shift and change. And um, that's not a huge concept in the book. I think I have a few sentences about that. And
Hmm.
when I speak, it's not a massive concept, but I do kind of say what I just said. Shifts and change over time, and that's okay. And what was really powerful, I gave a speech at Vanderbilt the other day, and a student came up to me and he said, I had to leave Vanderbilt for a year when I was dealing with leukemia. And now that I'm back, I actually have really been struggling to find things that bring me joy because the things that got me through that season,
Hmm.
music, TV shows, these things, now I associate it with chemo
Chemo.
and with being
Yeah.
sick. And he said, so I actually needed to hear that it's okay, that our joy profile shifts and changes, and that it's not just me who's kind of
Hmm.
hunting for new things. And I just thought it was so wonderful of him to share that. And it was just a really interesting kind of take on that
Hmm.
concept with how it showed up for him in this context. And but I just think even if it's not a drastic life event, even if it's not divorce or an illness,
Hmm.
I mean, we're all sort of constantly exploring its new music, its shows, its recipes, it's engaging with the world around us. And I think it's an exciting invitation instead of maybe kind of a bummer if people are feeling a
Hmm.
little adrift and because there's so much out there that could be part of your joy profile.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, and you used the word reflection, and you used it earlier when sharing your story when you were on that airplane and kind of just started journaling all the things that bring you joy. And I think, both of those things that you were just saying really emphasize the need to pause and reflect. Um, because the last thing I want anybody to do is like, you know, engage in activities or do things because you're like, this brings me joy, and then kind of burn out on those things because those things no longer bring them joy. But then they're stuck in this mindset of like, well, it used to, so is something wrong with me? And it simply could be, like you said, your joy profile shifts. I mean, I think all of us, we go through life, and like you said, it doesn't have to be this big event. We just, what we're interested in
Right.
changes. Maybe circumstances, don't allow time for certain things, or we pick up a new hobby because that hobby fits into our current lifestyle a lot
I
better
mean,
than maybe a previous hobby.
think about that sourdough
Oh,
explosion at you
in the
know what I'm saying?
pandemic.
You know, we are making banana bread and sourdough, okay? We are new here. Everyone's baking.
Exactly. Well, because, yeah, the world shut down and we were at home and we had more time on our hands to make sourdough. I never joined the sourdough train. I enjoy eating sourdough that other people make, but I know it takes a lot of time.
Uh, a labor of love I have no interest in. Well, no, I feel so sorry. I really hope one of my friends does not listen to this episode because she gave me the full thing for my birthday. It was like the bread basket and
Oh, wow.
the whatever and the starter, and I gave it all away. It went to Goodwill like immediately. I'm like, that is so not my jam. I have no patience. I love to cook. That brings me
Hmm.
tremendous joy. But I'm just kind of riffing in the kitchen.
Yeah.
If you say measurements, I'm like, no, 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 please, not a science experiment in my home. No.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to one of the first things you said about how everybody's joy is different. For some people, joy is making sourdough. For you,
Absolutely.
it is absolutely not.
Absolutely. And it's funny because I find you have people who love game nights and people who would not be caught dead at a game
Oh,
night.
I love
I
game
love a game
nights.
night. Love.
Yeah.
Give me the most complicated card game on the planet. I want to play it for hours. And other people are like, SOS, like, no. And so, but it's fun. And again, this is such a celebration of what makes us unique and special. And it's just been it's been an incredible almost full year of getting to talk about
Hmm.
this subject, and it never gets old. It's just so fun and wonderful. And so I'm grateful for the conversation, and I hope listeners get a couple tips and tricks. And really, I would encourage people to make their list of what brings them joy. Put it on the fridge. Why
Yeah.
not?
No, I love that. I love that so much. So, yes, as we're wrapping up, one thing you've really emphasized throughout this conversation is finding those like small moments. It doesn't have to be this big thing. You talked about, joy in the morning. We've been talking about the, good surprises. How would you say these like daily moments, small things like that you've emphasized so much really improve people's overall well-being? Because I think a lot of times people think like, oh, there needs to be this big shift. So, you know, you've given so many beautiful examples. So, like at the end of the day, how are all these small things going to add up to help people with their overall well-being?
I think two pieces here. First of all, I really believe that tiny joys stack up if you let them.
Hmm.
I really think they do. And I say in the book, the second piece of this answer is, you know, if this book could be summed up in two words, it would be pay attention.
I love it.
I just think there's this misconception about joy that it is something to write off. It's trivial, it's silly, and sometimes it can come in these seemingly childish packages. It can be
Hmm.
these things that are judged or dismissed or it's so unserious. But the message of the book is joy is serious business. It really is. It's so
Hmm.
tied to our physical and mental well-being. And this book is such an invitation to be gentle with yourself and other people when it comes to your joy and their joy, because the world needs more of it. And we know that
Absolutely.
the world needs more joy and light. And I just think I just think so often it's dismissed.
Hmm.
Particularly I find in highly intellectual circles, people are just, oh, you can't
Yeah.
possibly like fully understand the nuances of our grave contemporary existence if you like Harry Styles.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, I'm looking at the world around me. I watch the
Hmm.
news, I read the news, I know what's going on, which is why I want to champion joy and light wherever and however it shows up because
Hmm.
it matters.
Yeah,
I mean, thinking
absolutely.
back post-pandemic to, where we started this conversation and where this adventure and this book really started, is I just thought, how often have I written off pop music or
Hmm.
sports as, oh, that doesn't matter. It's just entertainment. But actually look at thousands of people coming together for this shared experience. It's so
Yeah,
powerful. And particularly
absolutely.
after the isolating pandemic, I had this new lens on it. And I've never really been a big sports person, but
Hmm.
now I love sports. I'm like,
Really?
"Look at what sports are doing out here. This is great." I moved to
Yeah.
the South and everyone was like, can't wait for football. And I'm like, I couldn't care less. Now I'm like, let's go, Ole Miss,
Hmm.
Alabama. Like, I don't really care, but I love that everyone's excited and it's bringing people
The
together.
community. Yeah.
I
Oh,
think
yeah.
it's
As somebody raised in Massachusetts, has lived in South Carolina or the Southeast for now, I think half my life. I'm not going to do the math right now. About half my life. Yeah. Even if I don't care about football, like I care about football.
I'm into
Like
it.
you have to.
Why not? Why
Yeah,
not? And
absolutely.
there's one rule in the book, and I joke that that's kind of shocking as a former lawyer that I didn't pocket full of prefaces and restrictions and what have you. And the one rule is if something is not harming you or anyone else, we got to get after it.
I
You know,
love it. Yeah.
because you say Renaissance Fair, I'm like, pass me a turkey leg, baby. Like, let's go, okay?
I love it.
Life is hard, and we need
Hmm.
to celebrate when joy and light show up.
I love that. I love that so much. Essie, I have loved this conversation so much. I could talk to you for hours. It was very joyful, pun intended. Um, as we are wrapping up, anything else I haven't asked you about? Anything about your book Styles of Joy you want to talk about? Any last thoughts or things you want to touch on before I'll invite you to ask people where they can connect with you and purchase your book and anything like that? But anything, any last thoughts you have?
So there's one fun concept that we didn't talk about, and I love that you're trying to give your listeners kind of practical tips
Hmm.
and ways to incorporate more joy in their life. And part two of the book is all about adopting others' joy as your own. And I
Love it.
introduced this concept called joy in the wild, where my life was really challenging at that time, but I got so much joy from observing other people's joy and
Hmm.
seeing joy in the wild. And all of a sudden, I really trained my eye to start looking for joy outside of the boundaries of my own life and outside of my own, you know, world. And it's such a fun and infectious way to live. And it's so contagious in the best way. And one of my favorite anecdotes in the book is I was writing the book and this is like peak introvert joy. I'm sitting in a coffee shop alone. Like that is
Love
like
it.
my phone's on airplane mode. No one can bother me. I'm wearing a baseball hat. I'm writing in a journal. That is like my Zen zone. Okay.
Love
So
it.
I am happy as a clam. And I look up and I see this father-daughter duo on like a Sunday afternoon coffee date. And she's like maybe 5. Jessica, when I tell you she's eating this blueberry muffin, like it's the greatest thing that has ever happened to her. Like her little hands are like stretched in the air, like holding this blueberry muffin in both hands in her tiny fists. And it's just like so delicious. And she's just like in it. Okay.
I
She's
love
having
it.
the best time. Her dad starts laughing.
Hmm.
So like it started as her joy, but then it was his. And then
Hmm.
it's mine from across the coffee
Yeah.
because this is this ripple effect of
Hmm.
this sweet moment. And I just thought, there it is. Joy
I
in the
love
Wild.
it.
It was first hers with this like amazing blueberry muffin, and then it was her dad's because he's laughing
Mhm.
at his cute little girl, and then it's mine. And so I just encourage listeners to look for joy in the wild in
I love it.
2026 because those who seek will find. That's for sure. That's a version of a C.S. Lewis quote. I think
Yeah.
any soul who consistently or constantly seeks joy will find it. It's something to that effect. I'm
Hmm.
butchering it, but that rings true.
I love it. I love that. And That was a lovely story to end our conversation on. So, the last question I ask all my guests is where can people connect with you? Where can people purchase your books? And if you have any exciting things coming up in 2026 that you want to share, feel free to share those as well.
Yes, so I'm protecting my joy by not being on social media right now, which is
Correct, which you
really
told me before.
fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. 11 out of 10 recommend. If you are looking for joy in 2026, get off those socials. Um, and the book is Styles of Joy. It's available anywhere books are sold, and more information is on my website, scperot.com. And if any listeners are looking for a speaker for any events coming up in 2026, I would love to be your girl. Give me a call. It'd be so fun.
I love it. So I will put your website and link to your book in the show notes and no socials because you are protecting your joy by being off social
And
in
I am
2026.
slowly trying to write a little bit more, and that's looking like Substack.
Okay.
Not saying it's the best writing in the world, but you know what? We are trying to get back
Yeah.
on it. After I sealed the manuscript, I struggled to even like write a thank you note. Like I was out of words, Jessica. I had
Oh,
no
I am sure.
day. So,
I'm sure. I mean, not the same experience, but like I didn't read for fun for probably literally 5 years until after I got out of grad school. Because I
yes,
was like, I have had to read so many research articles and textbooks and things that I am like burnt out from
yes.
reading.
Same with law school. I was like,
Oh, I'm
don't
sure.
be with more words. I read all
Words.
day.
Yeah. No.
So,
Well,
and that's kind of my fun project right now. So,
I love it. I love it. Well, I will link all of those in the show notes, like I said. And Essie, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. Thank you so much for being my first episode of season 6. This was a great episode to start 2026 off on. And thank you for giving the listeners so many practical tips on how they can cultivate joy in the new year. So I just appreciate your time and your knowledge so much. So thank you so much once again for being here.
such a joy. Well, overused word, but what a joy. It was really fun. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you, the listeners, for joining for today's episode of Psych Talk, and I will catch you in the next episode. Bye. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Psych Talk. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the show. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend. Don't forget to follow me on all socials at Jessica Lee, PhD, and the podcast at Psych, Talk, Podcast on Instagram.